We are ready to roll. I'm going to bring on our guest Sal in just a second. I want to give you a quick update on how things work if this is your first time to a Fast Track coaching event. It's a very brief conversation, although since we got on late, we'll go a little late. Sorry, Sal, tough luck. But we're going to have a 30-minute conversation that's really meant to help promote your creativity, your business, move things forward. We're going to talk specifically around pricing today. Really excited for this conversation, and I've seen a lot of buzz around people really needing this kind of a conversation, so I suspect it'll be pretty valuable. But again, if you've not been here before, there is and there's folks all over the planet here. I see you in the chat room chatting it up. And given the breadth of folks involved, rather than just kind of watch the event, my encouragement is to actually not be a spectator but participate. And the best way to do that is to click the big button that says, once you signed in, click the big red button that says ask a question. And you can either ask a text question or a video question and actually join us online if you want. But again, there's a lot of you guys here today, which is great. And I want to jump right in and introduce you guys to Sal. Sal, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you being here, man.
No worries, Dane. Glad to be here.
And sorry for the headache on getting you online.
No, I'm just glad it wasn't me. I don't want to be that rookie speaker making the mistakes.
No, this is our 120th episode. I'm that rookie speaker, which is even perfecter. So how lame is that? So, dude, you and I, we had a chance to get to know each other just recently, and I've seen you around. I've heard your reputation on how you were received at WPI this past year. It was explosive. Everyone loved what you had to say. Same with After Dark. And you've been at this thing for a long time. You're a business guy. You care a lot about it. You're doing a lot of work. Get people up to speed a little bit on kind of some of your come from and your background that got you to where you're at before we get into the conversation around.
Sure, absolutely. So, you guys know I'm based in the Midwest, born and raised on the East Coast, and went to business school. Shot my first wedding at about 8 years old. Had an aunt who was into photography, had a dark room, just exposed to it in various ways, just like we all are. But at no point in time did I expect to be a professional photographer. I went to business school, actually thought I was going to be a lawyer. Glad that didn't work out. And then eventually got tired of the corporate grind, wanted to do what I love, punched out of Microsoft, which is where I used to work, and the rest is history. But my background is business. I'm not a formally trained photographer.
That's great. I'm realizing as I'm talking, I'm trying to adjust the mic levels here for me. So it's funny that you say you were an attorney because, or on the way to be an attorney. That reminds me of our friend, or I don't know if you know Jasmine or not, but Jasmine Starr was in the same kind of boat. And it seems like the caliber of folks getting in this industry is the bar's raising as more people are in.
That's right.
Both from business, acumen, and just the whole gamut. But I love that your mind frame coming in is more than just the craft of photography, that you're thinking big picture. And I know that there's going to be a lot of folks who are interested in this conversation around pricing. Oops, there we go. And what I want to hear from you a little bit is, from a business mindset, what is it that you see as like you said, I know you said a lot of photographers are making very similar mistakes. You've seen it over and over again. It's basically, given your background, what you've seen before. What is it that you see photographers messing up the most, and how can we address that?
Well, the first thing I see when I'm helping, I always try to help photographers. Coming out of the corporate world, I really didn't want to feel like I was a second-class citizen because I was an artist. And a lot of people, out there think we're photographers, we're second-class citizens, we should be starving artists. And there's nothing romantic about being a starving artist. That's not what I wanted to be. I wanted to be successful, I wanted to make money, and I want to raise the bar for what it means to be a professional photographer. So with all that being said, as I help photographers all over the place, the one thing I see photographers do is compete on price. And I can tell you right now, in my market, I'm not competing on price. We're probably one of the higher priced studios in the Midwest. Average couple spends anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 with us on their event. And my thing is, if I can make it work here in the Midwest, we can make it work anywhere. It's all about the process and establishing value. And so for us, I tell everybody, I don't sell pictures, I don't sell images, I sell an experience. It's all about the client experience that they have with us that makes them want to spend money and refer us out.
Well, it's interesting because this idea of the Midwest, when you talk about kind of limits on that, there's a lot of conversations. I know you hear this all the time from photographers who say, yeah, I'm in, podunk nowhere, or or a bigger city, like I'm in Dallas or I'm in San Francisco. In fact, Josh Rodriguez asked the question, I moved to a new city, Dallas, from Dallas to San Francisco. What are key factors in pricing in this new market? And I have a hunch what you're going to say has something to do with it's not about the city. So how would you respond to these kinds of questions when people raise them of, I'm in a new market, I don't know how to gauge my pricing in a way that would be smart for business and not really have the circumstances of the city decide, or the market value of photography decide things for the photographer?
Yeah, I mean, if I move to a new city, I mean, we're dealing with that right now. We're based in St. Louis, and we're going up after the Chicago market, after the New York market, and so obviously I would not charge a bride the same price here that I would charge in New York or Chicago. Those price points won't fly, and so this is a catch-22. What you can't do is just go out there and start surveying photographers in the area and go, oh well, Bob charges $8,000. I'm as good as Bob. I'm going to charge $8,000, right? It doesn't really work that way. But I think when you work your way into a new market, you do have to get a feel for, where you should be. And so for me, coming into a new market, keep in mind, St. Louis was a new market at one point for us. And what I did was I took a look around. I looked at what the competition was doing. Not only competition in regards to style of photography, type of photography, overall offerings. Are you offering, albums? I mean, it has to be an apples to apples comparison, and that's not always easy. So, one of the first things you have to do is just take a temperature, a reading of it. And I always tell everybody, if you're booking, 100% of your meetings, I call it a kill rate. So if you go into a meeting and your kill rate's like 100%, your prices are probably too low. People should not be booking you every client you sit down with. At least that's my general rule. I don't know if I've helped Josh or made it more confusing for him. Can you guys hear me? Oh, okay. Well, damn it, let's go. I didn't realize. I thought if Dane was gone, we couldn't do this. All right, so we're going to hijack Dane's system here for a while. So, like I said, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see photographers make. So, guys, don't feel like you have to compete on price when you're putting your packages together. And let's go there with this. You can go when you're pricing your work. You can price yourself via packages, or you can price yourself via a la carte. There's a host of ways to price your work. So I'm a package kind of guy. So my entire business model is based on packages versus the a la carte model. However, you have to step back from that package model and start at the foundation. And the foundation to any package-based model is strong a la carte pricing. And what I mean by this is you can't charge $10 for a 4x6 and 5x7 and think you're going to make a living as a photographer. You just can't cover the cost of goods. So I hope you guys are following me with that. Your a la carte price, money's like water. It's going to follow the path of least resistance. So if you don't, if your a la carte prices are too cheap, that's where everyone's going to go. They're just going to buy 1, 2 prints, small prints, or heaven forbid, the large 8x10 wall prints that we all have to deal with. Re-educating clients that's not in fact a piece of art for their home. And so what we do in our business is we have a very high a la carte pricing, high for my area. So to give you perspective, in my area, we sell wallets, 8x10s, 5x7s, 4x6s. We categorize those as gift prints, and we sell those for $50 a la carte. Now, if I were in New York or Chicago, I'd be at a much higher price point for those a la carte items. So don't feel like you have to copy exactly what I'm doing, but the model is sound. The model will work no matter what part of the country or world you're in. So you have to price those a la carte items high enough so that you're going to dissuade clients from spending money on the a la carte level and push them into the package. And that's really how we work our system. So when we meet with a client for the first time, we have 3 packages that we put in front of them. You can call them whatever you want for the sake of this conversation. Call it package 1, package 2, package 3. We lead with a top-down approach. So I found that the psychology of it all is that clients can go top-down from pricing. They can rationalize that. So the first package we put in front of them is our most expensive package. Okay, and then from there, I find that mentally they can go down in price. But if you put your cheapest price up first, it becomes very difficult to pull them through to the higher level packages. Hold on, looks like Dane's coming back on. Dane, how's it going, baby?
Okay. It's going good. I thought I'd go take a coffee break while you just ran my show. Is that cool? I just wanted
yeah. Hey, we were having fun, man. They were having fun, man.
Yeah. Clearly, you don't need me here. It's not a problem. But I do feel bad, and if I get kicked off again, just keep going.
Okay. Well, Dane, you have to promise me something.
Said. All I've been doing is sweating
here. If we get an opportunity, we'll have to do this. We'll do this
running
again.
With the questions so that people aren't caught up with me. And if I ask questions that you've already responded to, just move me along. But you did mention early on this idea of selling the experience, and I saw this question from Jen Sweden ask the question, how do you market this idea of selling the experience? Because, I mean, everyone's selling an experience. You go to Disneyland, they're selling an experience. You go to Starbucks, they're selling an experience. How do you as a photographer sell the experience?
Yeah, Jen, that's a great question. Let me tell you how I start selling the experience. What I do not do is send my pricing. I don't put my pricing online, and I pretty much refuse to email pricing to my clients. And here's my simple philosophy on that. And I know if you talk to 10 photographers, you'll get 10 different answers. If you put your pricing online, you're encouraging clients to price shop. And that's the bottom line. And so I might hear the pushback I get from people sometimes is, well, I don't have time for all these meetings. That's fine. Publish something that says prices starting at. Maybe that's online. Because if they don't meet at least your starting price point, there's really no sense for a follow-up meeting. So with that being said, what we like to do is, we'll tell our clients packages starting at $49.99, or if it's a destination wedding, we need to get a little more information. But we encourage them for a face-to-face meeting, and it's in that face-to-face meeting that I sell the experience. In fact, in many cases, I'm hammering other photographers, because what I do is I tell my client 2 things. I say there's 2 things that should be important to you when selecting a photographer. The first is the style of photography, right? A photographer can't change their stripes. This is how we see the world. This is what you're paying us for. But the second thing that I think most people underestimate when selecting a photographer is the personality. And I tell my clients this very statement. I say, if I'm driving you nuts right now, I'm going to drive you nuts during your wedding day. And so you want a photographer. I'm a very outgoing personality. And if you want a photographer that's going to help drive your day and help you up, you should be selecting based on those things. Hold on, I'm seeing some feedback. You guys apparently can't hear me.
Oh, I think they can hear you. If anything,
okay.
The issue's on my end. So that's really helpful. And I love, honestly, Sal, when I first met you and we had a chance to talk a little bit, I was just struck by how comfortable you are in your own skin, how you've embraced exactly who you are and what you're about. And if that's off-putting, just means that you're probably not in the best conversation with or the right customer. And you speak very straight about everything, and again, that sense of confidence, Tamara Lackey mentioned this in the chat room, that sense of confidence really is compelling. What do you say to the photographer who doesn't have that sense of oomph and like command, they're just, maybe they're more introverted, or they just don't have the sense, they're just kind of getting rolling. How can they leverage their personality in a way that's on display and overcome those kind of inhibitions? Does that question make sense?
No, it makes total sense. I think it's like you said, you have to be comfortable in your own skin. Mm-hmm. My wife, for example, I'm a total type A personality, so I don't think there's enough room in the house for 2 of us. And my wife complements my personality perfectly. And so I'll use her as an example here. She's a very easygoing, relaxed type of personality. And so there's times where we'll both meet with clients and they'll book her. So my way isn't the right way. You don't have to be a very outward personality. But the key is, Dane, like you said, you have to be comfortable in your own skin. So for you guys who are a little more introverted, don't feel like you can't compete, right? Just understand your strengths and weaknesses. In fact, use that to your advantage against guys like me. Go, hey, I believe in a more relaxing day. It's your day. I want you to enjoy the day, and I'm just here documenting the day as it unfolds. I mean, I just made that up on the fly, but I'm sure if you work at it, you can come up with a real strong delivery.
Love that, and really the idea of this delivery, this narrative. I was on a call this morning with I do this mentor program where I coach some studios around the continent, and my client I was speaking with, he was asking me to kind of give my take on things, and I would share how I would do things, but then I'd immediately turn it on him and say, well, how would you say it? Because when it comes from your voice, it's so much more authentic. It kind of flows from who you are, and I agree with you. That idea of a strength out of that bias, that particularity, is what will help the client, the customer, sort through who they should be speaking with and why. So I love that. Let's take a few more questions. Regarding pricing again, Kevin Sumcock asked the question, where should a new food photographer be relative to pricing? Should they be just under or on par, or should they come at it and ask neither of those questions and come up with the pricing a different way?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question. Let me give you this piece of advice. The one thing I see new photographers starting out is they think they should work for free. Okay? So let me tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. Just because you're starting out for free, don't discount your services and think, oh, I got to do 2 or 3 weddings to get my portfolio built. That's the worst thing you can do, okay? Because you're putting yourself in a hole that you can never get out of. Now, what I would tell you to do is, if you want to get into wedding photography, the one thing you need to do is learn the ropes from someone. You do not want to go into a wedding shooting and missing key moments or not understanding the flow of events. And so what I would do, get away from this pricing worry, make sure you're solid on the flow of the day. Then step back after you've worked 2 or 3 weddings maybe, working under someone. I have people work under me all the time. Learn the flow, get comfortable with it. I think that's going to give you a better idea of where you should price yourself and your work.
It's helpful, man. This idea that of new photographers underpricing their work, it's a mirror to this question. And there's a cynic. Xander, this might be too strong to call you a cynic, but I know this is something that people feel. How do you deal with wannabes who flood the market with cheap prices? This has been killing my business. I don't like the way that question's framed, because I think the barrier to entry in our market is pretty low. Anyone can get in the game, and I don't think anyone's entitled to business. But that said, when there's an abundance of photographers who are coming into the market, and that's pretty inarguable. There's a lot of folks that are coming in. How do you compete? Right. When it comes to, because I know, like you said at the beginning, you don't want to compete on price, you want to compete on experience. How does that, say more about that? Because the felt need that photographers are having, that I hear every day, and you hear it all the time too, is there's just so many new photographers, I don't know where to position myself.
Right. I love the fact that everybody's a photographer nowadays, and in my market, I'm a big believer. If you know my system, you know I love bridal shows. And again, that's a whole other conversation. I know some of you hate them. But there's a bridal show in town we go to, and I'm not kidding you. There's 35 plus photographers in there. And there's a core of 5 or 6 who are there at every show, and then there's all this flooding of new photographers at every bridal show, giving away the house for like $1,200, shoot and burn all day long. And again, I have a studio that is successful. And the way we do that is, one, it's pretty clear that these people are new for whatever reason. Maybe their work just isn't there, right? And they're cheaper. But when a bride steps up to my booth, beyond experience, I'm offering superior products, superior service, and you know what I tout? I tout our turnaround time. That's one of the best things to having a competitive advantage. You can flip through any news station and find a horror story in your market of someone whose photographer went out of business. They haven't gotten their pictures in 2 years. And so we tout our turnaround time. I managed to turn our weddings around in 2 weeks or less. And so for those photographers who are taking longer than 2 weeks to turn around your weddings, you got to check yourself, because that's the easiest way to differentiate yourself in any market, because the newbies can't do it.
So I love that, because you're getting down to brass tacks when you're talking about the specific things in the real physical universe that you can actually do in the experience, this kind of catch-all experience thing, because people are going to experience something. And for the folks that have experience in the market and they can leverage turnaround speed or maybe a host of other things that we could start talking about, that's a massive leverage point. So if you're a new photographer, been at it just for a little while or been at it for a long time, to stop and pause and go, what are the skill sets that I could accentuate that maybe other people in my market can't? And for you, one of them is turnaround time. What are some other ones that people could spark in mind and go, oh, okay, that's it. That's the concrete thing that I could leverage if I wanted to differentiate in my market?
So maybe, for you guys who feel, I'm watching people post below, so I got a little ADD going on, but if you feel like you can't turn around in 2 weeks or less, you can turn around. There's so many solutions out there now. Trust me, I'm not sitting at my computer editing at 3 in the morning. I outsource this stuff. And I'll tell you what, up until about 6 or 12 months ago, that was a 4-letter word. But if you want to run a successful business, you have to find scalability. And so we outsource. We use a company called Revolution Imaging and Design. They turn this stuff around for me. Now, I haven't completely stepped away from editing. I edit some of my competition prints or, maybe 5 to 10 pictures that I'm going to present to the client as more artwork. But man, I don't need to be involved in narrowing down images, sitting at my computer 8 hours to white balance and color correct images. I got better things to do. We make money shooting. So with that being said, how can we differentiate ourselves beyond editing? Because I think everybody can outsource their editing, right? But we use albums as a point of differentiation. So we use very high-end albums. We use Fineo. We actually make our own albums for our high-end clients. I know not everybody can do that, but we offer very select types of leather. We print, we bind in-house, but you can use Fineo, you can use Graphy, you can use size of the album to differentiate.
Sal, again, what you're saying resonates so much with me. I think this idea of focusing on what you do best, outsourcing the rest, that old Tom Peters line is just so critical. But at the same time, I get in these conversations, feels like almost every day, where people are like, yeah, I get that. Philosophically, I need to outsource, but I can't afford to. I can't spend $800 on an outsourcing solution for an event or a wedding, which does relate to pricing, because if the pricing's so low and they're not getting revenue in the door, then they're paying people to take their pictures. So in my mind, I hear this and I go, oh, this makes perfect sense. I have to charge more so that I can actually cover my costs and make a profit and actually focus on the things I want to do, or not just want to do, but I need to do if I'm going to be competitive. What do you say to the photographer who just goes, this is all great and fine, but I can't afford to make these investments in things like outsourcing or whatever? I know my own response, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, if you can't afford it, that's the first sign that you're doing things wrong right now from a pricing perspective. At the end of the day, you might step back and go, oh my God, $50 for a 5x7 or $100 for a 5x7, that's ridiculous. Yeah, it is ridiculous. You're not expecting anybody to buy a 5x7, but if they do, they're going to pay a premium for it if they just want to come in and buy one picture. And it's simple. You have to be able, first of all, you have to have the answer to that. I get clients all the time. They're like, oh my God, why is a wallet the same price as an 8x10? And I tell them, I said, because it takes me the same amount of effort, work, preparation to get that image ready for you as it would a 4x6, an 8x10, or anything else. So again, that goes into driving them towards packages, but you have to get your pricing right, and a lot of people aren't thinking about a few key metrics. When you're putting pricing together, you got to think about your cost of goods. That comes from the business world. So when you're talking about cost of goods, how much is it really costing you? So let's just talk 16x24 canvas, for example. If you go to Simply Canvas and you pick up a 16x24 canvas for $120, and you're selling it for $200, $250, $300, you're losing money. Your cost of goods should be around 10 or 15%, if not higher. So those are key business metrics that as an artist you may not be thinking about, but you have to think about, because that gives you enough margin to outsource, to buy new equipment, I mean, come on, man. We don't want to be shooting with weddings with 40 Ds for the rest of our lives. I mean, we've got to be able to upgrade our equipment and our lenses if we're going to be true professionals.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, in the chat room, I know you're watching this too, there's some great dialogue in there, and my buddy Becker's in there, and he's talking about how he doesn't outsource things like post, and I get that. I've seen the system. It's killer. It's fantastic. And what I'm not hearing you say or me say or any of us say is the right thing is to go and outsource X, Y, or Z. The point is to come up with a system that actually delivers and differentiate yourself from your competition and puts you in the best possible position to win. So if you're like a whiz accountant, you may not need to outsource your accounting because you can do it in your sleep and it's no big deal. Right. But for other folks, like me, when I think about bookkeeping, I like get hives. I get so freaked out about it. The last thing I want to do is do that. And I'm just so bad at it, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's something that I need to get rid of. And again, this idea that photographers are often, and I don't want to just make a broad stroke like this because it's not true for everybody, but it does seem like there's this kind of desire for someone just to go, tell me what to do, when in reality, every creative professional I know that does it really well, they know themselves so well that they can figure out, no, this is the thing that I need to do, and these are the things that I need to get rid of. So as I hear you talk about things like comfortable in your own skin, differentiating yourself, creating an experience, knowing what to outsource and when not to, when you're talking to the photographer in front of you, Jane or Joe or Frank, and you want to give them feedback on getting clear on who they are, where do they go first? Like, how would you direct a friend who is getting in this business to figure out what they should be doing? How do they find out what their strengths are and their talents are so they can go leverage those things?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, what Becker does or doesn't do doesn't really matter, right? Becker's like any other photographer. Every studio is completely different. Just like Coke runs differently than Pepsi, yep. Everybody's going to have a different strategy. But the key is knowing your strengths and weaknesses. And if you're not turning images around, if you're taking 6 months to turn images around, that's a weakness. So you have to address that. And so I don't want to get stuck on the particulars of outsourcing versus not outsourcing, because that's not what I'm I'm preaching. What I'm saying is turning images around in 6 months is a weakness for your business. It's a competitive disadvantage, and you've got to address that. So for us, that created a competitive advantage for us. Now, truth be told, we have 52 weddings this year. So if we're shooting 52 weddings, I've got a couple of choices to make. So it makes sense for me to outsource. Now, I'm not going to lie. In January, when I've got one wedding, I'm probably going to edit my own images. That makes more sense, right? It's more fiscal sense there. But these are the kind of things you've got to know your strengths and weaknesses. I help so many new photographers that are starting out, and when I'm consulting with them, some of them don't even know how to use Lightroom or Photoshop.
Right.
But they're good photographers, right? And so this is the key. This is a situation where, okay, you can hire an editor, you can learn Photoshop. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But in the interim, you've got to figure out a way to clear your queue. You've got to get that production stuff out because you don't want people talking negatively about your business because of that.
It's interesting. The idea of a series of decisions keeps coming to mind for me. So like a new photographer, an experienced photographer, doesn't really matter. So much of small business is just a series of decisions that a lot of people seem hesitant to make the decisions. I know I feel that tension of like, gosh, it's not that I need more time, Seth Godin says, I just need to make a decision. I need to move on. And so much of what I'm hearing you say is this idea of get clear, what am I trying to accomplish, who am I, and what are the steps I need to make to do it, and I need to make the decisions to get from A to B. How important is it in your mind to be able to make those quick decisions, get the feedback of whether or not something works or doesn't, and so you can get on to the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, let's step back for a second. For those of you who don't know our history, in 2007, our gross sales were less than $50,000. That was our first year in business. Last year, we crossed over 900K. So in a 4.5-year window, we pissed off a lot of clients because our price points were changing. But I was not wishy-washy about it in any way, shape, or form. We were making big decisions that I knew were right for the direction and future of my business. And so sometimes as artists, we can overanalyze things. Even when we're editing, we can spend an hour editing an image and it probably looked good at the 10-minute mark. But the reality is, you got to get it to the 80% mark. Nothing's ever going to be 100%. Get it to 80%, throw it out there, see what the market decides on it, come back, you know, the feedback loop. These are all business terms, and make some new decisions.
I want to honor your time. Are you open to go in a few more minutes, or are we okay? Because I know we started late and I jumped off.
No, man, let's keep going. This is awesome.
Okay, cool. Well, we have a ton of questions in the queue, and I want to jam through them as quickly as we can. So we'll just answer them, and if they're not too big, then we'll keep rolling. If not, and if you want to just skip it, we'll go for it. But here's the first question. It's from Maria Wiggins. She says, is it better to sit down with a client post-session with proofs or online album for ordering? And of course, she's asking specifically around weddings, which I know that's you focus on that. And my own bias is that there's different workflows for weddings and for portraits and seniors and a whole bunch of other things. But how would you respond to this question from Maria?
Yeah, I love this question because, again, I'm a huge proponent of in-studio sales. I think if you put your images online, you might as well chop off 30, maybe 50% of what your potential sale is, because the client needs to be there with you, walking them through the process, showing them the images, making recommendations, and if that's all done online, I'm sorry, they're looking at web resolution images and no way to make the right decisions. In case, you know, think about it, guys. By the time your post-event is done, you've probably been working with the client through the engagement session, through the wedding session. You've known them for almost a year now. In many cases, you're their trusted advisor. So when you're sitting there with them in your studio, having champagne with them, we have something called a red carpet preview. So we have people in our studio. We open up champagne, wine, beer. We talk for 15 minutes before they see a single picture. Then we put a nice slideshow up to show them their pictures, and it's an event for them. Yeah.
So do your pictures get better the more they drink? I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, they get. By the time it's all said and done, they love their pictures.
That's helpful. Sorry to interrupt. It was too good to. Hey, let's keep rolling because I want to make sure that we get through everybody. Ben Trevor asked a question. How do you handle digital files? Seems like the market demands it these days, which is, again, it's a loaded question, but this is a question that are on people's minds. I hear this all the time. What do you think?
No, it's a great question because in almost every single market, and I think it was Xavier or Xander asked a very similar question. You know, he's competing with these people who are at the $1,500 price point. Those are shooting burners all day long, right? So we get clients all the time who come to us, want to be in our entry-level package, and want the digital negatives, and we don't offer it. I mean, it's that simple. But the way to differentiate yourself is you have to almost educate them, right? They can read Martha Stewart or, you know, any of these bridal magazines, and it's almost, you know, something they're expecting. They don't really know what they're going to do with it, but they're expecting them. And so we educate our clients on the difference between, here's what a digital negative is going to look like out of our camera, because we don't give them edited images. And here's a piece of art that we would create from you for your event. Now, that being said, our digital negatives are in our mid and higher end packages. So, you know, one of my packages, for example, is $79.99. In that package are the digital negatives from their wedding. And so we use negatives because we know it's such a high demand item as pull through to the various levels they're going to spend with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. You know, well, you know what, there's so many good questions, so I just want to keep rolling because I want to make sure we get everyone covered. Vivian asked the question, and this is a bit of a repeat, but I missed it too because I was off the screen. But you mentioned your a la carte pricing very quickly, and I missed it. Can you please repeat that? Just kind of a quick synopsis of how you do the a la carte thing.
Yeah, so our system works. We're all package based. So there's studios out there that focus a la carte. You know, you come in, you build your own package. Nothing wrong with that. It's just not what we do. It's not what works for us. We are package based, meaning I want a client to come in and pick package 1, 2, and 3. And the reason I do that is because I know I'm going to make at least that much money from a specific event. I don't have to worry. I don't have to have hard sales post-event. My system is very much a soft sell. Now, that being said, in order for the package system to work, you've got to have high enough a la carte pricing. to drive people towards the package. Remember, money is like water. It's going to follow the path of least resistance. So if your a la carte pricing is too low, i.e. $5 for a 4x6, 5x7, they're going to go a la carte. They're never going to end up in your package.
Got it. You know, you mentioned the word system quite a bit, and I had this offline conversation with my friend Tamara on the old phone here, and I'm hearing a lot of people in the chat room comment on you have a system that you talk through, and people are already retweeting your quote about money and water, and they're trying to find the path themselves. But
Nice.
talk a little. You have a system. I know you have a thing that's going to be coming up that we're going to talk near about at the end of the show, your tour, and I have a hunch you're going to talk about your system a little bit there. But you think systematically about all these pieces, right? Whether it be your packages, your sales process, your experience at the end with the wine and the beer. All those things are part of an overall system that you walk people through. Now that you've built the system for you and you're fine-tuning and tweaking it, are you advocating that people copy, or kind of copy, but at least have some kind of systematic approach to how they do this? And if so, how do you advise people on building their own custom system that works?
Well, no, you're right. We have a 25-city tour. We can talk about it in a little bit, where we are going to drill in depth, breaking down packages, pricing, and so that every attendee, we're actually encouraging them to bring their pricing with them to this seminar. It's $69, but it's what we're going to do is walk them through creating their own packages and system. Now, with that being said, I am encouraging them, take my system, replicate it, and you will find success. So we're working with a lot of studios where we've completely overhauled their system. They're following ours verbatim, and it's working for them. And I'm talking about California, New York, Florida. So again, if we can work in this blue-collar town and make a system like this work, it's going to work anywhere.
Got it. Well, let's jump a couple more questions here. Tracy asked a question, and again, this is a very felt need question. She says, my photography business is so new and wondering how to start the pricing process. Where do I begin? And we've had past guests on, some geniuses, people like Julia Woods comes to mind immediately, who, or Vicky Toffer or Jed Toffer, and they talk specifically about, PPA standards, figure out your cost of sale first, work in a profit margin, make sure there's profit, and make sure you get paid and part of your expenses. And that's certainly how I direct people, is to say, look, unless you know how much you're spending, it's hard to figure out a good price that makes sense. But if people are starting out, how do you direct people on this idea of getting started with their
So how about I pose the answer a little bit differently? So I understand what the PPA is suggesting, and it's definitely solid. But I feel like I believe in the KISS system. Keep it simple, man. So I don't, even though I'm a business guy, I don't want to sit here tracking all these freaking metrics. And most photographers don't want to. They just want something simple that works. So for our system, I actually reverse engineered it. And I know that flies in the face of everything that people are taught. I picked a number. I knew a year ago, 2 years ago, I wanted to have $500,000 in gross sales. And so I reverse engineered those numbers. I knew that to hit $500,000, I had to do so many weddings at a certain price point, right? So if you want to make $500,000, but you're going to shoot weddings at $1,000 a wedding, well, that's 500 weddings. Well, that number's not going to work, right? So you start finding your rhythm. From there, so my philosophy, I would say, is almost a bit of reverse engineering.
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily a problem or runs against it, because I've done sessions with folks like Julia who would say, look, figure out what you want to make, divide it by the number of sessions, and that tells you how much you need to make per session, and that'll get your revenue number. Exactly. But if you're, like I remember in 2000, I was really stoked. 2009, I had this great year, got all this revenue, but because I wasn't tracking expenses very clearly, I didn't actually keep a lot of that money. A lot of that money went out the door, and I didn't get to keep it. And I look at back in retrospect, and I'm like, oh, well, what I didn't clue in on was I didn't account for both the revenue I wanted to bring in plus the expense that was going out the door. And when it comes to pricing, it seems like both of those are pretty critical. Would you agree with that, or what do you think?
No, absolutely. As photographers, though, it becomes almost a challenge to. There's so many different tasks and different hats that we wear.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
one minute we're wearing the CEO hat, the next minute we're wearing the sales, manager's hat, the editor's hat, the photographer's hat. And,
Right.
in theory, you should figure out, okay, this task is a $25 an hour task, this task is a $50 an hour task, and build that into your overall cost structure.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm just about keeping it simple. And what I have found works for us is a simple cost of goods number. That is probably one of the most strategic numbers for us. If I can keep my
Right.
cost of goods, meaning the price of a canvas, the price of a CD, to around 10% of the price I'm selling it for, the rest of the numbers are going to work themselves out.
Well, there's no doubt. If you can keep your cost of sale to 10%, you're going to do fantastic in any business. That's fantastic. But that means you're charging at a premium, and you're working really hard on defense to keep those prices down, the cost down, which I think is shrewd. Let's jam through a couple more of these questions. Fuse asks, do you feel having a commercial space or studio helps you book more and have more or a better quality of wedding or a high caliber wedding? This is a good question. I hear this all the time. And by the way, I want to just throw in, it relates a lot, I think, to people's mindset around prestige, and they're more of a legitimate business, they think, if they have that space. And I know, again, in my own experience, I've had spaces. I've actually recently moved my studio home and actually enjoying greater profit margins as a result of saving on that overhead. But is there a blanket answer on this idea of commercial space yielding necessarily better quality weddings?
No, I would say I'm in a very unique position to answer this. So we, up until 6 months ago, we did not have a commercial studio space. We were working out of our homes. And I think in either scenario, you can create an answer that works to your advantage. So, for example, up until 6 months ago, I would sit down with a client, meet them at Starbucks, and I would say to them, hey guys, I just want to meet you at Starbucks. I want to keep it real casual and loose, just get to know you, enjoy a cup of coffee together, right? And they loved it. They loved that it was so informal and relaxing. So I planted that seed. Now we have a studio space, and I use it to my advantage there. I just say, hey guys, when you're looking at other photographers, you want to make sure they're going to be around here for a while. And as you can tell, we're an established, studio, and we're going to be here. So, it's definitely, it can work both ways.
Yeah. I love how you put that, because that's accurate. Whatever set of circumstances you find yourself in, you can leverage them to your advantage. It's almost like a jiu-jitsu model, where regardless of the pressures that are coming against you, pay attention to those pressures and then flip it, reverse it. And I think that's brilliant. Because what I notice is, like we mentioned Becker earlier, Becker's the kind of guy, honestly, I'm a huge fan of Becker, and Becker's the kind of guy that, honestly, if his system blew up and everything went away, or he was no longer in Orange County, and all of a sudden he's in another part of the world, I get the impression he would just find a new way to put a signature kind of experience on things. And the one that's working for him right now is great, but again, I don't think it's about those circumstances. And a lot of new photographers, in my experience, because it's so tempting to look at these folks and go, well, of course that works for Becker. He's got a sweet system, or of course that works for so and so, because look at the context they're in, or the Toffers, they have the 7,000 square foot studio. But it's not about the studio or any of those pieces. It's the individuals who leverage their circumstances and their strengths to get themselves a massive return. And then I get in these conversations with these people. I'm like, don't you see the gold that you're sitting on? But they're just not paying attention to those resources that are right there. Would you agree with that, or no?
Yeah, I mean, the most successful people in the world, what makes them so successful is their ability to adapt. So, 10 years from now, we're going to be doing things completely differently than we're doing them today. But you have to understand, this is something I learned at Microsoft. My boss would always say the same thing to me. He would say the only constant here at Microsoft is change. And nothing could be truer, even in our own industry. So just when you think you got something figured out, guess what? There's going to be something new that pops up. And if you don't adapt to it, you're going to be like those guys who refuse to acknowledge that film was dying, right? And you're going to be like those guys now who are going to go, oh, video's a fad. That's not going to happen. So our industry is constantly evolving, and you have to be able to adapt as a professional. That's why people like Becker, our studio, all the studios out there, no matter where you drop us, we're going to find a way to find success.
Yeah. Stephen Smiles asked the question, after 25 years, I've left the corporate world too. What's your view of the 80-20 rule for clients? And for those of you guys who don't know, the 80-20 has been explained a lot of different ways. One is that 80% of your revenue is going to come from 20% of your people. But there's a bunch of, that ratio works in a lot of ways. How would you answer this question, Sal?
Tamara, they're not going to kill Skype. Sorry, I was responding to Tamara writing something about Skype. Hey, Stefan, give me a little bit more information about when you're talking about the 80-20 rule, what specifically are we talking about?
Yeah, I too, and let's do this. I'm going to drop the question right now, and then, Stephen, if you wouldn't mind clarifying, and we'll bring the question back up if we have time before the thing's done. So let's take another one. David P.S., when somebody is price shopping over the phone, how do you get them to meet you before taking the price or talking price, which I think is a great question.
Sometimes that's tougher than you would imagine. I mean, if you're, for us, sometimes I have meetings with brides who are in New York. Obviously, a face-to-face meeting isn't always possible. The first reach to us is usually via email. They're asking for pricing and packages. We send a pretty standard email. Our pricing starts at, here, I'll share it with you guys, and you can hear kind of exactly what I say to clients via email. Pricing is determined by the type of album, amount of time, number of photographers. Our packages include attention to detail, hands-on time throughout your wedding day, an engagement session, a beautiful wedding album, unlimited locations, and a host of other unique items that we use to personalize your day. If this is something you're interested in, what we find is that presenting you with a bulleted list of items can create more questions than answers. So what we would like to sit down with you to be able to answer all your questions. So that's kind of my push back to the bride. If they still put pressure on me for that bulleted list, I will send it to them. And then I try to schedule a Skype call. Right, so at least Skype or iChat, something where you can at least establish some sort of rapport, or again, maybe it's just a phone call. But I think if you just start sending that stuff in email, I write those brides off. And I would say it's more like 98 to I will lose that bride more than likely.
Yeah, and like that's a problem. Losing a client that isn't meant to be your client is actually going to buy you more time to go do what you're supposed to do. And so that's such a win.
Yeah, you can never operate from
Go ahead.
What I was going to say is you can never operate from a position of desperation. Too often as business people, we just want that wedding. We need that wedding. We need that money. Hey, man, just relax. Believe in yourself. Believe in your business. Believe in your work. And the right bride and the right client will eventually find you. But sometimes those clients end up being your worst clients. So, never operate from desperation.
Becker, who we've talked about a lot today, he asked the question, how does a photographer know when they are priced right or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that there's a blanket answer for that. For us, the way we know we've priced ourselves right is, I like to think when we're booking about 50% of our meetings. So if I find that I'm priced wrong when I'm booking 90% of my meetings, that to me is sending the wrong signal. That means we're way too inexpensive and we have some wiggle room to raise our prices. So you got to find that happy medium, and I think it's there's a host of answers to that question.
Yeah, I like how you have a metric to kind of sort through it, and I think you're right. That makes a ton of sense. It's funny, though, because it rubs right up against the folks who are perfectionists. If they think they're failing 50% of the time, which they're actually not, they're trying to find their position in the market. That can feel daunting, and a lot of folks go, I want 100% of the bookings, but if they are booking at that kind of rate, what it's telling them is they're probably not charging enough, which I think is a brilliant way to put it. So thanks for that.
Exactly. You just got to find your happy medium.
Related to this, Bit of Flavory says, let me see, what if you have raised prices and you have a decrease in inquiries and bookings? In my mind, that's definitely going to happen, right? I mean, that's not a bad thing. It just means that you're kind of figuring out where you position.
Yeah, and that's gonna happen.
Right?
You should expect it to happen. Yeah.
Great. Again, I'm just trying to jam through these questions, you guys. Thank you for these. Camden Littleton asked the question, Can he come back next week and the week after? This is great. Just so you know, because I missed a quarter of this call, I am going to get you on the show, you bugger. You're coming back. And a lot of folks digging on this. So I'm answering the question for you, Camden. He'll be back. Just not exactly next week, but he'll be back. Are you able to also sell your gift prints to friends and family at those higher prices? And this is an interesting question. Do you actually keep that consistent pricing for everybody, or do you have a friends and family plan too?
No, and I feel like I'm going to do a disservice here for Brian by the way I'm going to answer this. In our packages, Brian, post-event, if you buy into one of our packages, suddenly, depending on what package you're in, the print prices drop dramatically, right? So I'm using that drop in price as leverage to get them into the package. So, for example, if on the a la carte menu, let's say it's $50, but now you're in package 2, that price may drop to $25 or $20. So this is all tied to the psychology of the sale. The client now starts gravitating towards the packages for that reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Show My Photo says, why not just hire someone in-house to do the work? This is related to the idea of outsourcing, and certainly that's what Becker's done, is he's brought on employees. My immediate thought, I want to hear you have to say on the Sal, but my immediate thought is an employee is an employee is an employee, whether it's outsourced or insourced. You just want to figure out how you're getting the best return on the people you're bringing in. Is that in line with you too?
Yeah, I would have this debate with anybody all day long. It costs more to hire and train an employee than to outsource. So let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If January, February, March, November, December, I don't have anything going on, I still have to pay that resource. I got to pay Medicare, I got to pay a host of other things for that resource. But if I'm outsourcing, I only pay when I'm sending them jobs. And it gives me scalability. So let's say in the month of May, for example, I've got 10 weddings. I don't have to worry about adding additional staff. There's going to be no slowdown on my end. Things are still getting back to me in that 2-week window. And that's exactly what you want, is that scalability. And so now one other thing that I think is huge, and other people may have a different spin on this, is if that person ever leaves me, out goes all that knowledge with them. But if I'm working with that company, I've got a host of editors that have been working on my jobs. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Very helpful. Just a couple more. Vivian says, does your system only work for wedding photographers? I do corporate events and headshots. It's a great question. Or is your system scale for other genres?
I'm going to tell you right now, our system is so simple. It's such a soft sell. It works for high school seniors, babies, families, corporate events. You don't have to be priced at my price point for this system to work. It really is idiot-proof for all of us. And that was the whole goal, is just to keep it simple. I hate selling. I do not want to sit in a room and be that $49.99 act now kind of guy. That's not me. That's not my wife. That's not our experience, right? So if you buy into this whole concept of experience, the one thing people love is it's just such a soft sell, so it works for anybody.
Fantastic. And then I love this question. The Jackie Show says, slap my wrist. I've done free shoots, and those clients were further friends expecting the same. Now what? How do you respond to that question?
Bingo. That's how we started out talking about that, is that you should not be doing those events. And real quick, when we came up, for that 4-year window, we were almost doubling our prices every year for a while. I mean, we were losing clients who were coming to us expecting to pay $1,500 or $2,000 for a wedding, and then suddenly we were at $5,000 for the wedding. So at the end of the day, you just got to accept it, know that you're heading in a better direction, and get your prices on board, and tell these people you just can't work for free. You know, this was something I was building my portfolio, come up with a reasonable answer, and let them know it's just you can't give them that same deal.
That's great. You know, Ross over in England asked a question, and I want you to answer this 2 ways if you don't mind. The first question, is there any way for guys overseas can learn about the system? If not, if they can't get to the workshops? And obviously, Ross, you know I'm coming over there shortly with my own system. But for Sal, I think a lot of folks are really interested in what you're having to say. And if you could talk a little bit about both the tour that's coming and then the behind the shutter resource that you have for folks. I think a lot of folks would love to get up to speed on that. Could you share a little bit?
Yeah, so we have a resource that we created for photographers. It's very inexpensive. It's called behindtheshutter.com. Just check it out. Look at the testimonials that are on there for the people that we've helped. So if you can't make the tour or the workshop, this is a great resource. You know what, Dane? I'll get you a discount code that we can give all the attendees here to join.
Okay.
So it'll end up being $199 a year. It's not expensive. Every month we publish new content that is very timely. So I'm not giving you pie-in-the-sky advice. I'm telling you exactly what we're doing in our business, real time, how we're doing it, and everybody who's been part of that has absolutely loved it.
That's great. I mean, I love the transparency and how you're sharing it. I appreciate it. So hopefully, Ross, it'll be helpful. And behindtheshutter.com is a great place to start. And also for the folks that are here in the U.S., if they want to come to your tour, there's a link right there, right, for them to find out all the cities and where they can sign up and that sort of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, if you go to behindtheshutter.com, right at the top, there's a link for the 25-city tour. And then we have 8 workshops tied to that where we're working with you hands-on. Anybody who's been part of my workshops, they say that I drive them into the ground because we start at 8 a.m. and we're going till about 8 p.m. with business, models, everything.
That's great. Hey, last question, and by the way, there's a bunch of questions that got left in the queue, and I feel bad, but the more we started answering, the more questions would show up, so I appreciate all of them. But Jerry asked the question, great session. Is there a way to get a copy of this for my wife so she can see later? And just so you guys know, especially if you've not been to Fast Track Coaching before, the easiest answer to that is we have over 120 different episodes at the blog.fasttrackphotographer.com. This will be up because it's being recorded right now, thanks to fine folks at Vocal. And it'll be up in the next couple of days, and you can check out all of them, all the guys from Seth Godin to Guy Kawasaki to Becker, to Tamara Lackey, to all the folks here in the chat room. There's been so many. In fact, if you go to the brand new DaneSanders.com site, you can see pictures of everybody who's done the show, and it's pretty awesome. And next week is no exception. We're going to have Jeremy Cowart is going to be on the show of Help Portrait, and if you guys don't know Jeremy, you're in for a treat. He is amazing. He'll be on next week. And some amazing business leaders coming on in the next little bit. John Jantz from Duct Tape Marketing is coming. Tim Sanders from Love is a Killer App. Julien Smith from Trust Agents. Ann Handley from Marketing Profs. Tons of great photographers and folks within the industry. I'm trying to get Mike Hanline on the show. I just wrote a letter to Robert Scoble, who I've had a chance to meet with a little bit. Hopefully he'll be on the show. But a lot of great shows coming down the pipe now. And I'd encourage you to take advantage of this as a resource for you. But Sal, I can't thank you enough for being here today. This is it's been a whirlwind of a conversation, and I'm going to get you back if you're cool. But I know that, especially given the chat room, how much talk there is, this has been really valuable. So thank you so much for being here.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. And, hey, Dane, if you need me to hijack your meeting ever in the future, I'll do it for you.
I appreciate it. I'll just pipe you in, and you can just take it over. In fact, I think I'll take a vacation. You can just run the show. It'll be even better. Hey, real quick, if you're watching and you want to stay in tune, Sal, what's your Twitter handle so people can be following you? Is it just Sal Cincotta?
It's at Sal Cincotta, and I'll throw it right out there now.
Okay. Okay, so if you're watching this on the replay, it's just at SALCINCOTTA. And yes. I'm at Dane Sanders. Would love for you to keep following us. And for those of you watching, you're asking about the code for behindtheshutter.com discount. You don't have that code handy right now. If you send it to me, I'll Twitter that later on today. So be sure to follow at Dane Sanders, and I'll get that out right away. So
yeah, we'll get a special code created for you.
We'll get a special code created for you. Okay, that's great. All right, you guys. Thanks again, Sal, for being on the show. Thanks everybody for being here, and we'll see you guys next week with Jeremy Cowart. And one last thing I should mention. Totally unrelated to Fast Track Coaching. Today at 4 o'clock, I'm interviewing this guy named Harry West. Or actually, it's 6 o'clock Pacific. My bad. Harry West is this amazing designer guy who's done work with all these multi-million-dollar companies around leveraging what people do socially and felt needs and coming up with products around that. And I'm excited to talk about photography and way more. But he's speaking at TEDx this week. If you're near Orange County, be sure to come to TEDx. I'm going with my friend Reed and Becker. We're going together to go see TEDx. Going to be talking with all these guys. TED is an amazing experience. Would love for you to join us. But today, I'll be tweeting about it and just follow the links to join us. But thanks again, Sal, and we'll see you guys all later. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.